Jay here for Stretford Paddock. This is the Paper Talk. As you can see, we're not outside Old Trafford this morning. We usually are on a Monday, but we're in the studio and we're live because we're going to have a chat about Dan Ashworth. It has finally been announced that he is coming. Well, I say it's been announced. It's been announced in the papers, in the press. It's not been announced by the club, but he is coming to Manchester United, effective immediately. It seems he's going to start straight away, so he can obviously be involved in the transfers this summer, which is what Manchester United needed and wanted. There was a bit of a sticking point with Newcastle. It was going back and forth quite a lot. Newcastle wanted, I think, something in the region of 20 million quid compensation. United were like, that ain't happening. Then Newcastle were like, well, if you are going to have him, he needs to start after the transfer window's closed. United again were like, that doesn't make any sense for us. We need him for this transfer window, which is going to be a big one, we suspect, for Manchester United. And it looks like the two clubs have come to a compromise. Now, we first saw this morning in The Athletic. I think it was Ornstein. He might not have broke it, but I feel like he did. It was the first one I saw anyway, so forgive me if I'm getting that wrong. And it's everywhere now. You can see it there. We've got it on the screen. Newcastle plays sporting director Dan Ashworth on gardening leave in February. So he's been sort of twiddling his thumbs for 4 months or 5 months. Has he, though? I don't know. Has he been really on gardening leave, or has he been involved in conversation with Manchester United? I don't know. After he revealed his desire to join Manchester United, Sir Jim Ratcliffe has overseen an overhaul of Man United's hierarchy since taking over earlier this year. Now, look, I'm pleased with this, and I like what I'm seeing here from Manchester United and from Ineos in terms of getting the right people in the right place. I have been banging this drum. I'm not alone. I'm not going to say I was the lone sort of voice of reason in a sea of insanity. Everyone was saying this, but I was one of the many that was saying, look, you cannot keep giving important decisions, footballing decisions, to people who have zero experience of it. Ed Woodward was a banker. He didn't know about football. He didn't have any connections to the football world. He didn't, I think, serve his apprenticeship properly before he took over from David Gill. And it was a shambles under Ed Woodward. It was like a kid in a candy shop. And you can see that in the results on the pitch and the fact we went through all these managers, and some of these managers who came to Manchester United with stellar reputations and left with those reputations almost in tatters because of the mess they had to deal with at the football club. So I wasn't a big fan of Ed Woodward, and I wasn't a fan of Richard Arnold either. I thought he was another one who shouldn't have been in the position he was in, but he was, and that's what you have to deal with. Even John Murtagh, I've seen people trying to sort of stick up for him and make excuses for him, but the noises I were hearing weren't great. And I think now you've got people in there, in these positions, Omar Barada, who's coming from Manchester City, who, despite having 115 charges hanging over their head, have had a lot of success. We know that. Jason Wilcox, another one who's coming from Manchester City via Southampton, had a lot of success. And now Dan Ashworth as well. I'm going to get into Dan Ashworth in a minute. We'll go through like how he's got to this point of being so sought after by Ineos and Manchester United, what it is he's done to get to the point where Newcastle and Manchester United are fighting over him, basically. Newcastle more or less give up on the idea of probably keeping him. So when someone wants to leave, you've got to let him go. But they weren't going to let him go without a fight, and it has been a fight for the last 4 or 5 months. So we'll get into that. Loads of people in the comments. Make sure, first of all, you are hitting that like button, please, people. Over 500 people watching. We haven't even got to 100 likes. Let's get to 100 likes, and I'm going to whiz through some of these comments. The Buttery Biscuit Base says, sounds like it's all going off already today. Good morning, by the way. Mick Hollahorn, Heaven Soul, Chris Scott, Manchester Maverick says, all saying hello, and various other comments. Manchester Maverick says, Jay's got to get Ethan to do the news announcement for the Dan Ashworth news in Jay's Parker as well. I wouldn't do that to him. Santa Notch says, 10 years sober. Congrats, Jay. Thank you. Notch, big up. Colin McDermott says, congratulations for a decade sober. Thank you. A lot of people saying congratulations. Thank you. I appreciate that. If you didn't know, I'm 10 years sober today. Had to be done, to be honest with you. I ruined it for myself. Akash K, pre-8, loads of people saying good morning. Loads of people getting involved in the comments. Make sure you are getting involved in the chat and hitting that like button. Right, so Dan Ashworth, the reason he's so sought after is his career has been one of an upward trajectory. He's done well pretty much wherever he's gone. He wasn't a very sort of elite footballer, if I'm being brutally honest. I think he had a non-playing career. Then he was academy director at Peterborough United, then went to Cambridge United, at the Centre of Excellence director. This is going back 20 years. Then he went to West Brom as youth team manager before being promoted to sporting and technical director. This was about 17 years ago. And then in 2012, he was appointed as the FA director of elite development. He was one of the creators of the England DNA. And then in 2018, he obviously had some success at England. He was there, I think, when Southgate got appointed, and we know what happened in that World Cup in 2018. It was England's best performance in a World Cup since 1990. In 2018, he was approached by United to be the technical director, but took up the same role in Brighton instead in 2019. obviously Brighton were almost a shining example of how to run a football club. They just brought in these players you didn't know a lot about, and then either kept him and had success with him or sold him. Usually they sold him, but they'd sell him for big profit, and it was a sustainable business model for them that kept them competitive in the Premier League, kept them ticking over, and also the football was good. And they took a few punts as well, didn't they? When they got rid of Chris Hughton, for example, and they brought in Graham Potter, a lot of people looked at that and go, well, that's a bit of a weird decision because Chris Hughton's kept you up, which is what you should be aiming for, to stay in the Premier League. But they wanted more than that. They wanted some good football as well. They wanted progressive football, and they got that under Potter. When they brought in Roberto De Zerbi, a lot of people questioned that. I know we're sort of heading towards the time that Dan Ashworth left, but I'm talking about Brighton as a whole have been a well-run football club who have sort of, not paved the way, but have been a good example to others. He was a big part of that. In February 2022, he joined Newcastle as sporting director. Newcastle have had some success as well. They obviously got into the Champions League under Eddie Howe. They've brought in some good signings, brought in some really talented players. They've not quite been able to splash the cash the way they want to because of PSR and FFP. And there has been a couple of questionable ones. I think the Tonali one was probably the one where some people go, well, should you have known about what was going on with him gambling-wise? But apparently, according to the reports, Newcastle did the due diligence. It was just something that they couldn't find out, basically. Anyway, I digress. Now he's joining Manchester United. He's obviously had a very, very successful career as a sporting director, as someone who's been on elite development, just the kind of guy you want involved in your football club. And you can see why Newcastle were reluctant to let him go, and you can see why Manchester United wanted him. Hopefully, with the likes of Barada, Ashworth, and Jason Wilcox, and keeping Erik ten Hag in the job, which is what I wanted to see, we can move forward as a football club and start doing what we should have done many years ago. The reason Manchester City have had all this success, not just because all these charges and all that might play a part in it, and the amount of money they spent, they also got the right people in the right positions straight away. So they looked at the model and they thought, right, okay, here's what you need. You need someone who can work with the manager, who can oversee transfers, who knows about that, who's got connections in the game. And you've got Tiggy Bergie-Stan, who obviously works very closely with Pep Guardiola. But even before Pep Guardiola, Manuel Pellegrini won a title, Roberto Mancini won a title. It's a very, very clever model that they've got there. Now Manchester United looks like we're getting our act together and acting like a modern grown-up football club. Let me know what you think. Get involved in the comments in the chat. Loads of people in the chats. Loads of people being very kind towards me. I thank you. I appreciate that. Right, here's one for you. Not a fool named Huggy, says Jay. Don't forget, it was Ashworth pushing for Southgate. That is a big red flag for me. I spoke about this on Transfers Live the other day, about this whole idea that Dan Ashworth wants Gareth Southgate to be Manchester United manager. How do people know this? Where's this come from? Let's not forget, Dan Ashworth hasn't spoken to anyone, hasn't given any interviews. He's been on gardening leave from Newcastle. I can't see him leaking to the press that he wants Gareth Southgate to take over from Erik ten Hag at Manchester United when he gets the Manchester United job after he's been off his gardening leave at Newcastle United. That makes very little sense to me. I don't know where this story comes from. I think it was people putting two and two together because they know each other from the England setup and coming up with five. There's nothing to tell you definitively that Dan Ashworth wants Gareth Southgate to be the Manchester United manager. And the reason I don't think it's true, the reason I think it's nonsense, is because Dan Ashworth knows what he's doing. He's a successful football person. And any person who's been successful in football knows full well that Gareth Southgate to Manchester United would be a disaster. I cannot believe that anyone who knows about football, saw what Gareth Southgate did at Middlesbrough, where he got relegated and then got sacked when they were in the Championship, seen what he's done at England, where he's done okay, he's done well in terms of where he's finished in tournaments, but he's also been relegated in the Nations League. He's also come unstuck when he's come up against the big boys, when he's come up against France in the World Cup last time round, when he came up against Italy in the Euros, when he came up against Croatia in the first World Cup he was the manager at. He's not quite got what it takes to get past those teams. And also, just because you've done well with England doesn't mean you can be a good Manchester United manager. We know Gareth Southgate is flawed. And I refuse to believe that basically the entire Manchester United fan base, the entire footballing world, looks at Gareth Southgate and knows he's not the guy for the United job, but Dan Ashworth looks at him and goes, no, he is. Everyone's wrong and I'm right. I just don't believe that for 1 minute. The one thing United fans can all agree on is that Gareth Southgate is not cut out to be the Manchester United manager. I don't believe that Dan Ashworth doesn't see that. I think this is just nonsense. I do. I just cannot see it. I cannot see someone who's had so much success with England, with the England setup, with Brighton, at Newcastle, who knows so much about football to the point where you have got Newcastle United demanding 20 million quid for you and Manchester United arguing and fighting to get you. You've got all that going on because you're so respected, yet you think the guy that's just scraped past Slovakia is the man to manage Manchester United Football Club. I don't see it. It's a Duck says, member who's been a member 22 months. Yes, Jay, way off topic. Just wondered if the unedited podcast brew can go on a members channel, or are there things that Steve says that are too bad to air. Haha. The brew is live. So, unfortunately, we can't edit the brews. You may have noticed sometimes with what's said on there. So there isn't an edited version of that. It's just that what goes out is what you see. We record it live, bro. So it's just streamed. So yeah, that is the unedited version. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about. We have got extra content coming on the members channel, by the way, and a few more behind the scenes videos. Plus, when we're away on the tour, there'll be loads of extra content on there. Heaven Soul says, also, if he rated Southgate, how comes he wasn't ever linked to Newcastle? Why Ashworth was there? Yeah, it seems a bit odd to me that the idea is that Dan Ashworth, who's never tried to get Southgate to any of the jobs where he's been at, is now trying to get him to a job he's not even taken on yet, and also the biggest job in football. I'm just not buying it. I'm sorry, I'm not. You may disagree, but please, either way, hit that like button. Get involved in the chat and the comments and hit that like. Heaven Soul says, off the buy is the one that gets edited. Lol. Yeah, it does get edited. And no, we won't be putting the raw footage out on any media whatsoever, I'm sorry to say. Showbot Entertainment says, hi Jay, how much work do you think Ashworth, Barada and the club have been able to do off the record before getting their feet under the desk at United? It's a really good question because you'd think they'd be involved, wouldn't you? You'd think there'd be some conversations. There's maybe a little WhatsApp group chat going on. They've got to be having some sort of discussion. It's like the whole thing about keeping Erik ten Hag. I can't for the life of me believe that Omar Barada and Dan Ashworth weren't involved in that discussion or didn't agree with it. Because I just think it'd be unfathomable for the club to go, here's a manager you guys don't want. Here's a manager you guys think isn't up to the job. Here's a manager you guys don't want to work with, but you stuck with him. I just can't imagine that. I think there has to have been some sort of conversation where the club and Ineos have gone, look, we're thinking of this, we're thinking of that, what do you reckon? And Barada and Ashworth have had their say in it. I just can't imagine a world where they haven't. BMW Racing 1974 says, Jay, congrats on your 10 years sober. Get yourself a bottle of cherry Coke with this. Thank you, my brother. Should we talk about Ligt? Because it's all happening here. By all means, get involved in the chat and the comments about Dan Ashworth. We'll get into that a little bit more later on tonight on the Paddock podcast at 4 o'clock. Don't forget, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on that one. Please hit that like button. We've not got to 500 likes. Come on, you can do it. Florian Plettenberg is a friend of the channel. He's been on the channel a few times. Says, being told United and Bayern are now in contact about a permanent deal of Ligt. Understand Ligt's agent, Rafaela Pimenta. There's a proper lovely name, innit? Rafaela Pimenta, I like that one. Working on a top solution. Ligt keen to join United and ten Hag as reported, but there are no total agreements yet. Ligt can sign a contract until 2029, as per Mike Verwij, who's the guy who's sort of the Dutch go-to guy. I like Ligt, and I wouldn't be against him coming to Manchester United. It would be kind of hilarious, though, if after all this talk, if we're going to do transfers differently, Ineos are coming in, they're bringing in Ashworth, they've brought in Jason Wilcox, we've got Barada, we're not just going to go back to the Dutch League or back to the players that Erik ten Hag has worked with at Ajax. We ain't doing it that way anymore. We're doing it this new way, and then the first signing you make under Ineos is a player that played under Erik ten Hag at Ajax. That would be pretty funny, but I wouldn't mind it because I think Matthijs de Ligt is a very talented defender. Let me know what you think. I know he's not exactly set the world alight since he left Ajax. He was probably, I think, the sort of the most sought after player in the Ajax side. I know you might argue there was a lot of good players in the Ajax side. Donny van der Beek, for example. Actually, I know it sort of didn't work out for him, but a lot of people were looking at him. But I think, obviously, Frankie de Jong as well is another one who's been heavily linked with Manchester United. But you look at de Ligt, he was the one I think that a lot of people wanted. Went to Juve. I mean, his time at Juve, won a Serie A, did all right. But then he goes to Bayern Munich, and it's like, it's a bit erratic, innit? It's a bit like up and down, I feel. I don't think it's quite the levels that we saw at Ajax, if I'm being brutally honest. So, I don't know, I've not watched a lot of him when I've seen it. It's a bit of a weird one with Bayern Munich. I always feel like there's never I mean, if you watch more of Bayern Munich than I have, by all means get involved in the chat, but it always seems to be like a little bit of a merry-go-round at centre-backs. Is it like Upamecano? Is it Kim Min-jae? Is it De Ligt? I know De Ligt's playing, but now he's like the go-to guy, or he was last season, but even then he's had injury issues as well. I think it was 22 games he played in the Bundesliga last season. So it's just been a bit of a weird one, but there is a player there. He's still relatively young as well. Let's have a look. How old is he? Is he 24? I want to say. Have I got that one completely wrong? Yeah, he's 24. So he's still a relatively young player. Loads of experience for a 24-year-old. And if he comes to United, he'll have been at Ajax, Juve, Bayern Munich and Manchester United by the age of 24. That's ridiculous. That really is. That's like 4 of the biggest clubs in the world, and you're still only 24 years old. Let me know what you think. Ridwan says, De Ligt is an extremely experienced 24-year-old. So much football he's played. He's 25 in 6 weeks. Thank you. He's 24 until he's 25. Someone talking about the kit. We'll get into that in a minute. I think there's a little bit of a discussion going on about the kit. Adam Kenny says, is De Ligt an upgrade on Harry Maguire? Certainly a long-term one. I think you'd say he's a bit more talented than Harry Maguire, wouldn't you, as a player? I like Harry Maguire. I think he gets a little bit of an undue stick, but also, what is Harry Maguire now? Is he 31, Harry Maguire? Or is he 30? I can't remember how old he is. I should know these off the top of my head because we have these. Yeah, he's 31. So, there you go. You can see this here. According to Dutch news outlet De Telegraaf, United have now offered a 5-year deal to Bayern Munich defender De Ligt. It's understood that Ten Hag has had several phone calls with the centre-back as he hopes to convince him to make the move to the Premier League. I hope those phone calls go better than the ones you had with Frenkie de Jong. Do you remember those rumours were going around? Oh, the manager spoke to de Jong. Yeah, he's mad keen on coming to United. Yeah, don't worry about it. Barcelona accept the bid. And de Jong says no. So hopefully, if this is the case, then De Ligt will be true to his word and we can get that deal done. I'd have De Ligt at Manchester United as long as it's not silly money. Let's talk about my favourite subject, Kobbie Mainoo. I thought it was an absolutely phenomenal performance yesterday for England against Slovakia. I thought he played really well. I thought he was arguably the best player on the pitch. I know Jude Bellingham was getting all the plaudits because he scored the goal, but I thought if you looked at the actual performance, I thought Kobbie Mainoo was the best one. I really do. And you can see there's a little stat for you. Kobbie Mainoo, 19 years and 72 days, became the 3rd youngest player to start for England in a major tournament knockout stage game after Michael Owen against Argentina and Wayne Rooney against Portugal in the Euros, the 2004 Euros. I think Mainoo's been brilliant for England. I think he's been brilliant since he's started playing professional football, basically. He's been great for United. He's been great for England as well. And I was chuffed to bits to see him do so well. I was worried when he got that early yellow card. I thought it was a harsh yellow card. You don't want to see a player on a yellow for like 85 minutes or whatever, because I think it's after 5 minutes. But he did what he always does. He shows that maturity. He was running with the ball. He was picking his passes. I think his pass completion rate was something ridiculous, like 96%. I mean, it was just an all-round great performance. And I thought England were poor, but he wasn't. And this is the big thing. I hate when it's like, well, England, everyone, they all played rubbish. No, they didn't. They really didn't. And Kobbie Mainoo, he was, the 3rd youngest English player ever to play in a tournament knockout game, was great. And more power to him. He has to start in the game against Switzerland. Santa Notch says, Mainoo shamed some of the players. He did. I think he did. Do you know what, right? I think when you look at Mainoo, you can see what he's doing. You can see what he's about. And I think sometimes, like, players, pundits, or ex-players, pundits, and even fans, like, don't appreciate him as much because of the style of player he is. Because I think they look at someone like Declan Rice and go, yeah, Declan Rice, fantastic, yeah, blood and thunder, passion, shouts, kicks off at the final whistle with the Slovakian manager. Yeah, that's what it's all about, you know what I mean? Yeah, that good old bulldog spirit. But I think if you actually watch the performances and the style of play and what he's doing, Mainoo's picking out better passes. Mainoo's keeping the possession much better than Declan Rice was and is. And I'm not saying Declan Rice is a bad footballer. I think he's a good footballer, but I don't think he's quite at the level that a lot of people make out. And yet more people seem to point the finger at Kobbie Mainoo than do at Declan Rice when things aren't quite going well. And I think that's a nonsense. I think if anyone was like, oh, what would you change? Well, maybe, should you change Mainoo? I know United fans won't think that. I think it'd be insane to drop Kobbie Mainoo now. He's arguably England's best player. Keep him in that team. The question mark is what you do with the rest of it. I think that almost anyone else is up for a change. I know Matt Gay can't play in the next game because he's suspended, so I think it's Konza who's going to come in there. But yeah, I think Mainoo has been an absolute breath of fresh air, both for club and country, and more power to him. Akash K says Mainoo carries the ball forward like prime Zidane at times. Yep, love that. Green Banana says, I'm midway through my application to adopt Kobbie Mainoo. Brilliant. I hope yours goes better than mine. Akash Case has put Walker at centre-back. Malcolm Campbell says, morning, Jay. Morning, guys. Let's talk about this kit. Someone's mentioned, I think it's Joachim Teresin, says the home kit has dropped. United and Adidas unveiled 24-25 home kit. What do you think of this, people? New kit's dropped. I mean, it looks all right, doesn't it? That's my insightful, opinionated take on it. It looks all right. Do you know what it is with kits, right? I was saying this upstairs a minute ago. Kits, for me, you appreciate them when you're successful wearing them. Like the 2012-2013 kit, I thought was dreadful. The Gingham one, yeah? But we like it because when you're thinking that kit, you think of winning the title. So it's sort of that skews your thinking of it. The one kit I hated was the white away kit last season because it looked Scouse to me. It looked like a Liverpool kit. And I didn't like that at all. But I think this one looks all right. Yeah, it's not that difficult to make a United kit, is it? It's just, you know what I mean? Like, as long as you don't do anything too drastic, you won't get it wrong, and that is fine. Let me know what you think. Are you going to be getting it? Are you allowed to, are we allowed to buy the kits anymore? Are we still #Glazers out so we don't buy the kits? Or now that Ineos own 25%, is that all changed? I don't know. Someone inform me. I haven't bought a kit for a long time, by the way. I think the last kit I bought was probably had Brian Robson on the back. CTB says the best is the AIG 2008-09-1. Akash K says I made my order now. Radu Stefan says still #Glaze out. I know we're still #Glaze out, by the way. I'm not saying we're not. Sean Grief says buy 25% of a shirt. Yeah, I think. A full name Huggy says we can buy the shorts. Lol. 0607 was the best, says Jay Hayes. Love all that. Right, listen, I'm going to wrap it up there. We're going to be back later on today with the Paddock podcast. Me, Joe Smith, Ronaldo Brown. There's loads going on in there with Ashworth, with the Ligt, with Mainoo's performance for England. So we'll be getting into all that. We'll talk about a little bit about Jared Branthwaite as well. I think there's a bit of movement there. So we'll get into that one. We're going to see what's happening with him because he's gone from looking like it was about to happen to now looking like it might not happen at all. So we'll chat about that. Make sure if you're not doing it already, please subscribe to the channel. Also, hit that like button as well, please. People, I've been Jay Motty. This has been The Paper Talk. Thanks for watching.